Hello!
Hello AOS fans!
It's the Agents of Beastgrave.
And we're here again with another video in our series about how to play Warhammer Underworlds. And today I think is the thorniest issue yet. And that is reactions. Reactions, and specifically how they interact with the action phase, which all gets a bit tasty.
Yes.
We can't possibly cover every single eventuality, though it's a lot easier now. Aggressive defences in the game, but we can't cover every eventuality. It is possible that in some of the edge cases we might not get it exactly right. So if you do think there's something wrong, do comment in below, and maybe we'll do an update of this video further along. But we'll try obviously and be as accurate as we possibly can. We'd hate to mislead anybody, but this is a difficult thing, and I think it's the most confusing thing to remember when you come into the game. It's one of the most confusing things.
And one of the first things you also want to do is check out the FAQ from Games Workshop. We'll put a link below where you can find them, but generally GW, when these things aren't clear, they will release an FAQ at some point to cover those items, and sometimes they can seem a bit counterintuitive, but generally they keep it on a fairly steady sort of level.
I was going to say sometimes they make it more confusing, but occasionally, normally they do sort it out. So you're going to play a reaction. It's either going to be out of your hand, out of your upgrade cards. It's going to be from a ploy, probably a reaction, or maybe it will be on your printed on your fighter cards. Some fighters have reactions within them, and a couple of upgrades have them on as well. So you might have applied an upgrade to a fighter, and then you're using that reaction. Now, a reaction is a break in the normal sequence of play. Now, we've covered that in our turn sequence video, and basically, if you remember, you start off on your activation. So you activate a fighter, you do your action, which we've also covered in a separate video. So let's say you've moved, and then at some point in that break of play, somebody might want to play a reaction. So perhaps somebody's got a reaction to when you make a move. Perhaps somebody's got a reaction when you want to make a charge. We'll come on to that in a second. You might finish whatever it is you're doing, and then somebody might want to break into the play. Then normally you go into the power step, but somebody may want to break into the play then. So there might be a reaction to the end of an activation or after an action, which we'll see are actually the same thing in a minute. It can get confusing because then you can react to reactions. So it can start to get a bit headachy.
Someone reacts to someone's reaction.
To be honest, the only way to really get to the bottom of it is to play it, see it working, and if you get confused is to ask. Do ask in the comments below. Do ask us on Facebook. But to be honest, the community is great, so if you ask anywhere, people will help you. There is a great article on Well of Power about how to do these
to work these kind of things out. The main thing is to also check that the FAQ doesn't already cover it, because quite often, if you've got a question or a problem or a situation you're not sure of, chances are someone's already brought this up in the past, and it may already be covered in the FAQ. But we'll try our best to try and summarise the point here.
Absolutely. I suppose the key thing is the first thing you have to think about is who can react. And this is a little bit counterintuitive to the game, I think, but I think it actually makes the game really good. Is if it's my turn, if I'm doing something, if I've moved and there's something to be reacted to, let's for example say it's a charge action, and a charge action, as you know, is a super action. It consists of a move and followed by an attack. Let's say both Pete and I have got cards we want to do which enable us to do a reaction to after the move. Which one of us gets to go first?
Well, in this situation, it's me. It's Robin's turn, but I get the priority. And another way of looking at who can react is who, in terms of the player, can react, and I always get first dibs in that situation, but also which models do I have that can react, any of them who have suitable reaction in place. So whilst Robin might charge one model, a completely different model, not involved in that attack whatsoever, may have a reaction to that charge or that move or that attack action.
Yes, and it's very important because only in a reaction window, for example, let's say it's after the move in this action, only one reaction can be played. So if Pete does have a card, and I'm waiting to maybe play a reaction after a move action that's part of a charge action, add one dice, let's say, I'm waiting to play it to make my attack more viable. If Pete plays a move, when somebody makes a move action, move one character, one space, Pete gets priority, and he closes that window. So the window is at the end of my move. Pete plays it, it's gone. I cannot play a reaction at that point.
It can be a very good defensive mechanism to use one of your cards to shut down one of your opponent's cards. you don't get reactions very often, so you're not going to have many situations where you will be able to defensively use a reaction to close down your opponent, but there are some out there.
Yeah, and we'll perhaps come on to the more obvious cases a bit later in this video. One thing I will say is I might have a different reaction that might be reacting to something that Pete does. For example, there used to be a card, and it's only available in the Relic game now, that used to be react when your opponent plays a ploy. So imagine Pete's reaction that he played was a ploy. So he played this reaction, push one fighter, one space. There's a new window there, which is Pete's played a ploy, and I can react to that and play with the card Jewel of Wits. And that will be allowed because it's reacting to something different. What I can't do is react to my own movement because Pete's closed that window in my face.
Yep, slammed it. Banging on the door trying to get in. It is important to also point out that reactions on ploys and reactions on fighter cards or reactions on upgrades, they're all the same reaction. None of those take precedent over any other.
No, they are. Anything with a reaction is a reaction, wherever it's printed.
Yes. So one example would be that good old Ripper, he has a reaction on one of his cards that says after he makes an activation with a fighter, that can then make a wolf attack action after that activation.
Yeah, after they've made an attack action. So if the rider has made an attack action, the wolf can also make an attack action if they're adjacent to the fighter, and that states after an activation where a fighter has made an attack action.
Now there are some upgrades which give some other people. One situation is the Duke's Bats, the Harriers in the Grimwatch Warband. They can get an upgrade which says after an activation you can then push this fighter 1 hex towards a wounded enemy fighter. Now in that situation, if Robin had Rippers and he attacks with that guy, after his activation, we both then have a reaction that can be played in that window after an activation.
Yeah.
My Harriers have their move 1 hex reaction, and Robin has his wolf attack reaction. And I take precedent there, so I can keep moving my Harrier 1 and stopping Robin being able to do his Ripper attack.
Closes down that, so you've got to look out for things like that. And that is where the most likely reaction bottleneck, if you will occur. Games Workshop have basically said after an activation and after an action are the same thing.
Yes.
So if I'm attacking, as soon as I've rolled the dice and resolved the attack, whether it be killed anything or pushed back or failed, as soon as that's finished, that is also the end of my activation. So there's a few cards that say after an attack action, there's a few cards that say after an activation, and they're actually both the same
exactly the
time.
Same window.
So that's what you really do have to look out for.
Yes. And it is a bit of a tricky one to get your head around to start with, but once you start looking at breaking down each part of the I'm going to use the term action, but I don't really mean action, but breaking down each part of that process into its own little window of reaction, you can start to work out that, okay, here's a reaction window where we both have something that can be played, and therefore the person whose turn it is gets second place choice over the other person. And it helps you start to realise that the reaction windows can be quite clear. You just have to try and look at it in a very logical format and try and break down each individual step as you go.
Yes, yeah, but it does get confusing, particularly after an activation, because as you know, some fighters all fighters inspire. They all have slightly different ways of inspiring, and some of them might be after they've made a charge action or a particular type of action or done something like Magor's Fiends after they've killed somebody. They inspire. So you have to think, well, maybe you have a ploy that's after an attack action. Well, which comes first? Do I inspire? Because it could be really significant. If you're inspiring to get more wounds and your opponent is about to attack you and take a wound off you, if you've just inspired to more wounds, perhaps you won't die, perhaps you will die. Which comes first? And Games Workshop in an FAQ did clarify what it was. And the order is...
The first thing you do is you inspire. That always comes first.
So if Magor's Fiends attacked and did damage, they would immediately inspire. And then the next one is...
Play a reaction.
So if I did have a card that I wanted to play, maybe when one of my fighters is out of action, I can do something. I can then do that because Pete took somebody out of action. He's inspired. Now I can react to it. And if Pete had something which was after an activation, maybe he's got a card that says if you take a fighter out of action, I think Magor's do have one. Make another attack. He couldn't do that until I've decided whether I want to play a reaction. So I could close that window in his face, but he would inspire first.
Yes. And then there is a third step in this process, which we will cover later on, which is scoring surge objectives. They do come last in that sequence.
And again, that can be important because maybe you might have a surge objective for being adjacent to somebody, but I've got a little reaction that does some chip damage that actually kills you because the person you had next to one of my people only had one wound, and he'd be dead, and you wouldn't be able to score that surge activation, even though it said after an activation.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't score that surge objective because I had killed them with my reaction. So the reaction goes first, and if I somehow, or maybe it's just a push, maybe it's not so dramatic as a kill,
no.
Maybe I've just pushed them away and they're no longer adjacent, and you now can't score that objective. So you just have to remember that it's order. It's inspire, reaction,
surge.
Thank you. Thank you for the words there, Pete.
That's all right.
I knew what I wanted to say, and none of the words came out.
It is just worth reiterating that this can be a very confusing area of the game for reactions. You might have to think about it for a few moments. Your opponent and you may have to sit down and try and work out what are the steps involved here and who takes precedent. The main things to remember is if it's your turn, your opponent gets to choose first when it comes to reactions. And if they do use a reaction during that window, that closes the window. You can't make a reaction afterwards.
Yeah, I do have to say, everybody I've played with at any tournament I've been to, which isn't a lot, everybody's very friendly, and so it can be hard when you're thinking about what you want to do, and quite often you go, I'm going to attack, then I'm going to react, then I'm going to do this, and you might just
start talking to them.
Just
do this, this.
Yeah, exactly. And so you are meant to give your opponent time to
sometime, yes.
To
it doesn't say how much in the rules.
No, and it's a little bit, but most people are happy for you to say, "Oh look, I'm really sorry, I needed to play something there." I know in some ways you should have given them the chance, and then you've given away something in your hand. But that's just one of those things. But people generally are happy for you to go, "Oh, actually, sorry, I really did want to react there," because it can be quite hard to keep it all in your head when you got to do things.
It certainly can. Sometimes you can be on your game though, and your opponent will do something. You'll immediately jump down their throat. I'm going to do this reaction. They're like, "Can I roll my dice first?" You're like, "Oh yeah, sorry, it's after that." But
yeah, so I think that mostly covers it, doesn't it?
I think so. Reactions are tricky. You can only have one reaction to a window. Your opponent always gets first dibs on that reaction window. The key points to remember here.
Yeah, but it is worth reiterating that a reaction that you've played can open a new window while it closes another, which you can then react to.
Whilst a reaction closes a door, opens a window.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah. So we'll see you next time in the Beastgrave.